presentation complies with USBE rule and Utah code, requiring assessment ethics training for all district personnel engaged in test administration in the district. Standardized administration of state tests is intended to provide an opportunity for students to demonstrate their abilities, knowledge, aptitude, or skills, and provide valid and reliable results. The importance of valid and reliable results stems from the fact that the results from uniform assessments are intended to provide information used by students to determine how well they have learned the skills and curriculum they are expected to know, parents to know whether their student is gaining the skills and competencies needed to be competitive and successful, teachers to gauge their students' understanding and identify potential areas of improvement in their teaching, LEAs, which are districts and charter schools, to evaluate programs and provide additional support, the public to evaluate schools and districts. Educators must adhere to all ethical practices and procedures as outlined in this policy when administering and submitting data for state tests. This is non-negotiable. State tests include Apple, Acadians Math and Reading, ACT, American Civics, DLM, High School Benchmarks, KEEP, NAEP, PEEP, RISE, Utah Aspire Plus, and WIDA Access 2.0. The Apple test is a 4-part test. Some years students only take one part, and other years they take the other 3 parts to determine their progress in a dual language program, and it is usually administered in October or November. In our district, we have dual language programs in Chinese, French, Portuguese, and Spanish. The Acadians Benchmark test for reading and math are required assessments for grades 1, 2, and 3, but the strict adherence to proper administration also includes all grades K6 for the reading test. The reading test is electronic and is given using an iPad. The math test is paper and pencil. These tests are given at the beginning, middle, and end of the year. The ACT is the American College Test. It consists of math, English, and science. There is also a writing portion that is not administered by the state, so juniors do not take the full ACT in their administration of the test. The test is given electronically to students in the 11th grade in March. The state civics test consists of 50 questions taken from the 100 questions found in the U.S. naturalization test used to grant citizenship in the U.S. and is required to receive a diploma in Utah. It is provided online and students can begin attempts on the test anytime after completing their social studies course in the 8th grade. Dynamic Learning Maps, or DLM, is the required alternative assessment for students with significant cognitive disabilities used to map learning throughout the year, culminating with a summative assessment. High school benchmarks are testlets of 8 to 15 questions that focus on specific strands within the Utah core standards. KEEP is a state test given to kindergarten students at the beginning and end of the year to measure both academic and social-emotional development. NAEP is the national test used to gather data for the nation's educational report card. Selected grades are randomly chosen by the state, and the test is administered by the state. PEEP is a state test that provides information on academic and social-emotional development of preschool students. The test is administered at the beginning and end of the year. The RISE test, which is the end-of-the-year test for ELA and Math grades 3 through 8, and Science grades 4 through 8. There are 2 windows for the administration of this test. The first window is the mid-year summative test for students taking advanced math classes that will cover 2 courses in a single year, such as a Math 6-7 class. The window for these mid-year summative assessments is December through February. The second window is for all other tests given at the end of the year. The window is 8 weeks before the last week of school. We usually lose a week of testing because the window includes spring break. The Utah Aspire Plus is a hybrid end-of-year assessment for 9th and 10th grade students, utilizing both ACT Aspire questions to predict student success on the ACT and questions from former SAGE tests to assess student achievement on state core standards in English, Math, and Science. The test is administered in March. The WIDA Access 2.0 test is administered annually in grades 1 through 12 in order to serve English language learners. Educator obligations required for assessment ethics compliance include: educators must provide students with an opportunity to demonstrate their understanding. Educators must conduct testing in a fair and ethical manner. And educators are accountable for these obligations to their district or charter school and to the USBE. The expectations for teaching practice in preparation for state assessments before testing declares that licensed Utah educators are expected to provide instruction aligned to the Utah core standards using appropriate locally adopted curriculum, provide accommodations throughout instruction to eligible students identified by an ELL, IEP, or 504 team, use a variety of assessment methods, including the formative assessment process, throughout the year to assess student competency and form instructional practices, Provide students with a variety of assessment experiences, including feedback on their performance and progress throughout the year. Use the reference sheets provided for specific assessments as instructional tools throughout the year. Use the resources provided for each assessment as applicable to familiarize students with the testing platform, tools, and question types. Assessment ethics with regards to accommodations include: eligibility for testing accommodations is determined through an ELL, IEP, or 504 team. Accommodations should be familiar to the students because they should be used during instruction and not just during a state test. For more information, see the USB-approved UPass Assessment Participation and Accommodations Policy on the USB website shown here. You may wish to pause this video in order to copy the link for future reference. LEA responsibilities during testing. Utah districts, schools, and charter schools shall ensure that students are enrolled in appropriate courses because state tests for grades 3 through 8 are triggered by a course number. Curriculum and instruction in all courses are aligned with the Utah Core State Standards. Parents are provided with clarifications and procedures regarding student participation in state testing. An LEA shall honor parent requests to excuse a student from taking a state assessment in accordance with the requirements of Utah Code. All tests are proctored under the supervision of a licensed educator. Utah LEA shall also ensure that educators and school employees who administer and/or proctor tests complete annual testing ethics training provided by the LEA. This video completes this requirement in Provo City School District. Educators review preparation guidelines and test administration manuals, TAMs, for the assessment prior to the test administration. Hardware, software, and network specifications can successfully support test administration. All school coordinators, administrators, and teachers who administer tests are aware of their role in the assessment administration. Licensed educators have specific responsibilities during testing. Utah licensed educators shall ensure that an appropriate environment is set for testing to limit distractions. All students who are eligible for testing are tested or recorded as to why they did not participate. A student is not discouraged from participating in a test. Students aren't penalized who have opted out of a state assessment. Students aren't provided a non-academic reward for participating in or performing well in a state assessment. Students who are provided an alternative learning activity if they have opted out of a state assessment. During testing, Utah licensed educators shall also ensure that students who have been opted out of a state assessment are allowed to be physically present in the room during test administration. A proctor is present and active proctoring takes place throughout the test session. At least 2 assigned proctors are actively involved in each test session. Test administrators and proctors review and follow test preparation guidelines and the TAM for each assessment. Finally, during testing, Utah licensed educators shall ensure that accommodations are provided to eligible students as identified by the ELL, IEP, and/or 504 teams and are consistent with those provided during instruction. Any electronic device shall be inaccessible by students if they can be used to access non-test content or distribute test content and materials. Makeup and test completion sessions are provided for all students according to the policies and procedures of the assessment. LEA responsibilities after testing declare Utah LEA shall ensure that the test results are provided to students and parents within 3 weeks of the LEA receiving them with information on how to appropriately interpret scores and reports, made available to educators for the use in improving their instruction, maintained according to LEA policies and procedures. Utah licensed educators' responsibilities for after testing declare they shall ensure that all byproducts of student testing are collected and secured after each test session and destroyed when testing is completed, as appropriate. Examples of student byproducts include scratch paper, notes, and student test tickets. All test materials are returned to the test coordinators as appropriate. LEAs and licensed educators share some responsibilities after testing is complete. Utah LEAs and licensed educators may use a student score from a state assessment to improve the student's academic grade for or demonstrate the student's competency within a relevant course. There are some restrictions for after testing for both LEAs and licensed educators. They may not prohibit a student from enrolling in an honors or advanced placement course based on a student's score on a state assessment or because a student was exempted from taking the state assessment. It is unethical for educators to jeopardize the integrity of an assessment or the validity of student responses. Unethical practices include, but are not limited to, providing students with questions from the test to review before taking the test, change of instruction to include specific test content, reword or clarify questions, or using inflection or gestures to help students answer test questions. It is also unethical to allow students to use unauthorized resources to find answers, including dictionaries, thesauruses, math tables, online references, and so on. Display materials on walls or other high visibility surfaces that provide answers to specific test items. For example, posters, word walls, and formula charts. Reclassifying students to alter subgroup reports. Allow parents to assist with proctoring of a test their child is taking. It is unethical to use students to supervise other students taking a state test. Allow the public to view secure items or observe testing sessions. Review a student's response and instruct the student to, or suggest that the student should, rethink his or her answers. Reviewing a student's test before allowing them to submit. Reproduce or distribute in whole or in part secure test content for taking pictures, copying, writing, posting in a classroom, posting publicly, or emailing. Unethical practices also include explicitly or implicitly encourage students to engage in dishonest testing behavior. Administer assessments outside of the prescribed testing window for each assessment. Explicitly or implicitly encourage parents to opt out their students from participating in a state assessment. To ensure that practice is appropriate, ask the following questions. If my student is to get a valid and reliable score that accurately portrays his or her ability to understand the material, will this action allow the student to answer a question that does not reflect his or her knowledge? If the action did not occur, would the student response be different? Or ask yourself, if my student is to get a valid and reliable score that accurately portrays his or her ability to understand the material, will this action prevent the student and parent from receiving an accurate score that represents the student's knowledge and understanding of the curriculum? Would my practice change if I were being monitored? Possible ethics violations are to be reported to the supervisor of the person who may be investigated, the school administrator, the LEA assessment director, or the USB assessment director. The required protocol for possible violations state that each LEA must determine local policies and procedures regarding ethics violations. In most cases, an initial investigation should be conducted at the school level. The LEA assessment director will review the initial investigation and determine findings. If the violation is of sufficient concern, the incident may also be forwarded to the Utah Professional Practices Advisory Commission, or UPAC, for review. If inappropriate practices are substantiated, educators or other staff may receive further training, a reprimand, be subject to disciplinary action, be terminated, and or lose their Utah teaching license. The LEA or an individual may also forward the incident to the Utah Professional Practices Advisory Commission, or UPAC, for review. Report forms may be found at the UPAC website shown here. You may want to stop the video in order to copy this link for future reference. Remember that you are responsible for knowing the Utah State law and Utah State Board rules governing state testing administration and testing ethics covered in this video. Links to the state law and board rule are provided here. You may want to pause the video here in order to copy these links down for future reference. For more information about the processes in place concerning the investigation of possible ethics violations, contact your local testing coordinator or district assessment director. You have now completed your annual assessment ethics training. You will need to fill out the form verifying completion of your training and submit it to your testing coordinator or administrator.